but I've been in the worksite wellness business now for well over 30 plus years. And then actually as a business for, I invite everybody, if they're down in the Southwest Michigan area, Kalamazoo, Michigan, we are going to celebrate 25 years with a conference. Our keynote speaker will be Uncle D Eddington. And again, that'll be on May 3rd. I have, again, been a provider of wellness services in what I consider a really fascinating area, following my bliss for the last 25 years. And my story of how I got engaged, and I am going to discuss what we found to be working in small worksite business, touching upon the evidence and some of the science that's out there. And I need to tell a little story about how Ken Holtyn got connected with this major research group at the University of Michigan Worker Health Program. And it's an interesting little story. Julie, my wife, and I started the business in 1987. And we were doing a model that was pretty interesting. At the start, we were actually failing as a business. And then my wife, Julie, came upon an idea, and we were both clinical exercise physiologists and working in hospitals. And one of the things that we found that worked in cardiac rehab was the personalized one-to-one counseling, face-to-face, the assessment, the follow-up component that we did at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 1 year. And then also there was a cadre of classes available. And this is still a model that is used in cardiac rehab today. And so after doing traditional wellness approach and it not working, I heard about this research group, University of Michigan Worker Health Program, and heard about Jack Erford, Andrea Foote, and Max Hyrick were part of this group. They were on the southeastern side of Michigan. They met at Henry Ford Hospital. And I heard that they were research scientists and that they were actually talking about research that they were currently doing and sharing that with whomever would come to it was a wellness coalition. And the meetings met once a month, and I thought that was pretty interesting. So I gave the group a call. I called University of Michigan Worker Health, and I'm expecting to get a secretary on the phone, and instead I got the research scientist himself, Jack Erford, and I introduced myself. We got into a interesting conversation, and I was really fascinated to hear what they were doing. And I did actually at the start most of the talking. And what I immediately said is I came across a model that we had been using in small work sites, and I know they were talking about doing wellness research in large work sites, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, some really big plants. And I described the model, which was, I said, was really focused on individual one-to-one counseling, coaching, aggressive biometric reassessment, follow-up. And I would then talk a little bit about the results we were achieving, which I thought was pretty phenomenal. And then if you could actually, and I was talking on the phone, and if you could actually hear a smile on the phone, I could actually hear a smile on the phone from Jack. And I said, well, you know, the challenge was in the past that I would talk about this at conferences and people would say, well, it can't be done. I mean, you're doing this highly individualized one-to-one approach, and you just can't do that in large sites. And again, with that, he just simply said, well, Ken, guess what? We're doing a similar model, pretty much what you just described, and we're doing it in plant sizes of 10,000 workers. And we are engaging people one-to-one, counseling them face-to-face and doing assessments, biometric assessments. And the rest, so to speak, is history. So he invited me along to be engaged with this research team, ongoing discussions for several years. Now, I must say that Jack and Andrea are both deceased now. They left our Earth plane in the mid-1990s. Max Heinrich is still around. He's still a very dear, close friend, mentor, colleague, and we have collaborated on projects going forth. But again, these scientists began this research into worksite interventions back in 1977, and that's quite some time ago. And the model that they researched and published about was implemented in over 100 worksites in small, medium, and large worksites. I was the spin-off on the small worksites, and they brought me along and took a look at my data and actually incorporated it into some papers that were published down the road. They reached over 100,000 people in worksites and participation rates of 75% or more. And this is pretty good considering that there were no incentives in these programs. And we had outcomes of cardiovascular risk disease risk reductions of 50% or more at worksites. This is a seminal paper that was published in 1991 in the American Journal of Health Promotion. And basically, it was the first paper to actually take a look at the different types of interventions that folks were using in worksite wellness. And there were 4 parts to this. One is they set up a site where they simply did screening, which was pretty traditional in that time and still is today. And the next site, they set up screening and classes. And the third site, they did screening, classes. They did what they called a menu approach of services, which was classes, individual counseling, small mini groups, with aggressive follow-up and counseling at that follow-up. And the last site, the fourth site, was all of the things that I've just mentioned above, plus what they call plant-wide organization, or as we call it today, trying to develop the culture and the environment within the worksite. And again, the historic fact of that research model had shown that with what was published then was that the fourth site, and you probably figured this out, had the most impact. The first site had very little, second little, third much greater because there was a component in there called follow-up, which was not really being done very widely in most wellness programs, and well, I hate to say this, but probably in a lot of wellness programs today. The next piece of research that Jack and I wrote about was we actually took a look at small work sites, and I believe this is like probably one of the first papers published in looking at what works in small business. And again, it was taking a look at a model that the features and the components of it were one-to-one engagement in the successful site, in the third site, follow-up coaching, counseling, and developing the environment and culture of the work site. The other 2 sites were not as successfully developed, and again, they had a smaller impact because they weren't doing some of the evidence-based components that we saw in the original first study. And again, they were kind of trying to take a look at could this model that was used in large work sites also be effective in small work sites. And again, what we found is that many of the components that were used in larger work sites could also be transferred down to smaller work sites. And this last paper, again, is taking a look, and it's kind of additive in the research. Max Heinrich and Cindy Seek did this, and Max Heinrich again used the cardiovascular disease risk reduction model that they studied and researched over the last 15, 20 years. And with the little bend on this, and that they were working with SAMHSA, Substance and Mental Health group of the federal government, with a grant, and they wanted to take a look at at-risk drinking levels in work sites. And so the challenge was that's a very stigmatized behavior. Most people don't stand up and volunteer for programs. And so what they did is they employed the cardiovascular disease risk reduction model, which was a proactive outreach type model, and used all the strategies that they've used previously. And then this time they trained the worksite wellness coaches, counselors, in how to assess at-risk drinking levels. And what was also provided in the model was telephonic help with a nurse telephonic line where people could go to the nurse line and be coached or counseled. And the end results of this again was that the site that had the proactive outreach, the screening components, and the one-on-one engagement counseling demonstrated the most effectiveness. And not only did it reduce the cardiovascular risk, but again, the target of this was at-risk drinking. It also reduced the by 3 years, the at-risk drinking levels by 50%. So again, it's a pretty amazing research study. Now this is data from in Michigan, and I was a vendor in this program. It was called the WCHP program, Worksite and Community Health Promotion Grant Program. And it was in place from 1989 to 2000. And many times when I talk about this model, and I've talked about it around the country at various conferences, the first thing that always comes up is very interesting model, but is it scalable? And again, what I would point to is the fact that it's been done, and it has been shown to be scalable, and this is the evidence of what was done in Michigan. And this was a Worksite Community Health Promotion Grant Program. Grants were given to small business work sites, and that was under 5 companies that had employees of less than 500. The majority of companies that participated in this grant program were probably under 100. And what this program did in the course of 12 years was it screened for cardiovascular risk, educated and individually counseled 275,000 small business employees. It was implemented in over 12,000 work sites. It identified 36% of the percents as being at high risk. They achieved a successful medical referral rate, meaning that we actually had to do follow-up to determine whether a client patient successfully saw their physician and received treatment. It achieved 53% risk reductions, CVD, 98% high approval rating. 97% of the people would recommend the program. The corporate people who implemented the program would recommend it to other companies. And within the context of this, there were approximately 200 vendors across the state. And again, what was very interesting is that there were a group of us that were consultants to this program, and we're actually already designing and talking about features of best practices. And so in order to be part of the program as a vendor, you actually have to go through a worksite a training in which you were introduced to worksites best practice features and wellness. You had to pass a written exam, and you had to pass a practical. And then you had to provide ongoing timely reports to the state. And then you would qualify as a vendor, and a vendor list was then obtainable by any company that would want to obtain a grant for its company. And grants were, you could get up to $9,000 per worksite over a 3-year period. Another interesting feature that we found, and a survey was done of the 12,000 businesses that actually implemented the program, and what did they perceive the benefits were of the wellness program. And you notice at the very bottom, decreased health costs. This was done in 2000. And again, understanding that most of these small businesses were community-rated companies, meaning that there was no benefit to them if they did a program and no reduction in healthcare costs. You've probably seen this before if you looked at small business and the demographics of small business, but it represents about 99.7% of all employee firms. Most of the people that are working are over 50% are working in small work sites. It's a huge generator of jobs, 65%. It's a huge economic generator. And many important facts as to why it's important to take a look at small business. There's some pretty good advantages to worksite small business. The decision to implement is made quickly. In larger sites, it can take up to a year or maybe even over for a decision to be made. There is the ease of program communication. Significant health outcomes can be achieved quickly in as little as 3 months. Strong loyalty is created. We usually see high participation rates, 70 to 100%. There's a family atmosphere within that small business sector, and supportive cultures can be created quite rapidly. Now again, talking about the activity of what's actually occurring now in small business. Remember, it's the majority of where people are. And then I need to add a little caveat here about this too, about we're trying to, really win the hearts and minds of people, and trying to change behavior has been an immense task for all of us in the wellness business, and we're still struggling and trying to find out how to do that, and then how to keep those health behavior changes in place long term, and how to sustain programs in work sites. And again, I believe the way to do this in the United States, in the worksite world, is where we have an opportunity. And right now, what we're up against of winning the hearts and minds of people are folks like McDonald's. And McDonald's last year spent $2 billion on advertising. And the CDC for Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity last year had a budget of $42 million. So you tell me who's going to win the hearts and minds. Average TV viewing time by a Nielsen study of 36 hours per week last year. Again, who's going to win the hearts and minds? Smoking, the CDC recommended that we spend about $534 million per state when we had the settlement several years ago. And not many states actually did that. They used the money for other things. The smoking industry, the smoking groups, smoking companies spend $34 million each day to win the hearts and minds of people. So it's very, very difficult to stay well in America. But I believe, and I know, and I hope I can get others to believe this, is that you can win the hearts and minds of people, and the best chance to do that is in small work sites. Again, that is where the majority of people are, and one of the crucial elements, and I'll talk about it going forth now several times, is that you have to have a culture of wellness, and you have to create an environment that supports that culture of wellness. And we can do that, and we've shown we can do that in work sites. And then I do believe we can win the hearts and minds of workers, and not only workers now, and I won't show it here, but we actually have data in several of our work sites of spouse programs that run side by side with their employee programs. And we are winning the hearts and minds of workers and also spouses. Now in 2010, Mercer did a national survey of 2,800 companies of employee-sponsored wellness plans, and they found that about 27% of small businesses report doing wellness activities. A lot of us may or should be familiar with the 204 National Worksite Health Promotion Survey. They looked at a cross-section of work sites across America, and what they found is that only about 6.9% of those work sites were offering comprehensive programs, so a great deal of the activity, and we still see this happening today, a great deal of activity that's being offered is not a comprehensive approach. And again, I'm going to talk about best practices. I did sit on two convene committees, CDC, on benchmarking worksite wellness best practices, and then a worker health index committee that also took a look at taking a look at best practices for wellness. And in that 204 survey, they found that only about 8% of small work sites offered any kind of wellness activities. And this is pretty dismal. Now, as a result of sitting on this Worksite Wellness CDC convened committee, they came up with what they called best practices, and these are features that I believe not only in small work sites, and again, I was on this committee, which was an honor to be on the committee, and I was kind of like the token small business guy because there just wasn't too many people doing small work sites. So they heard about me, I was there, and hopefully put forth some good representation. And I won't go into detail over every one of these points, but you can look at them. And some of the things that, most of them can be conveyed to small work sites. One of the ones that, in terms of looking at showing that you can actually, that one of the things that they took a look at is that you show that your programs are actually cost effective, cost beneficial to work sites, having an impact on healthcare disease costs might be a difficult one to show in small businesses. Again, community rated, they have very little access to health insurance data. But most all of them can be also looked at as being components that you'd also want in the small work site. And you want to employ incentives that are consistent with the organization's core mission. You want to operate at multiple levels, trying to not only work with the individual but also with the culture. You want to, and this is an interesting word, engagement. We were using the word engagement. If you read some of the data in the 1991 reports, we were talking about engagement strategies. Erfurt and Foote were talking about that many years ago. We still are today. That's an important component. Get actually people engaged in doing things. Achieving high rates of engagement and participation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this very specifically in Worksite Wellness and Small Businesses, what we shoot for. Sustainability was a feature in this where not only have you been in that worksite successfully producing positive health outcomes, changing the culture, but those programs are sustained over a period of time, and the programs need to be evaluated periodically. And we talk about comprehensive, and what comprehensive would mean in the small business would be that it works to measurably, and there are tools, and I'll have a resource that you can take a look at tools, and we've used them in our small work sites, where you can actually measure the improvement in the culture and the environment. And we do these, the cultural tool, at least semi-annually or annually. We do a environmental survey at least once every 2 years, in some sites once a year. You need to provide, again, the menu approach. You need to really address the needs of everybody, something for everyone. You need to give people choices. You can do the individual coaching, small groups classes, internet programs. You have to provide the periodic evaluation. Your program absolutely has to emphasize follow-up, and I'll do in detail what we do as follow-up shortly. The program needs to offer support for employees as long as he or she is employed at the worksite, and that's what the research has shown over the years. If you want to have a highly successful program, these are the kinds of components you need in a successful approach to small business. It needs to be comprehensive. Now, this is based on our experience of implementing these types of programs now for 20 years. This is what we found works. Within this program model, we do biometric assessments, and We actually measure the fitness, and we use a polar heart rate monitor test for that. We do body fat percent measurements. My background is I was an exercise physiologist for several years, practicing in clinics and hospitals, and this is just part of an assessment procedure that we use in cardiac rehab, and I brought it forth with us. Initially, we do these assessments, and we target 4 times a year with a person who has one heart disease risk factor, and that's going to probably be about 70 or 80% of employees within a small work site. Then in subsequent years, the second year, we go to at least twice a year. And we have within our, and I call it a health assessment tool, not a health risk appraisal, we have a health survey that within it we have integrated our coaching biometrics. Engagement, you need to target about 75% or more. You need to define what engagement is in a work site, and with this model that we've employed, we define it as a person needs to do a health survey, a biometric screening coaching session at least once a year, then they are considered engaged. 99% of our engagement is in person, face-to-face, one-to-one private sessions. We do utilize telephonic and internet, but we found they are not as effective as face-to-face, and we've used them sparingly, primarily as an outreach tool. A person who misses their face-to-face appointment will be targeted with the follow-up phone call, internet email message. Sometimes coaching will take place telephonically. Many times there's a call-in and a rescheduling because we do want to get their biometrics. We do and we place a lot of importance on the culture, and I will pretty emphatically say that based on my 20 years of experience, or 25 years of experience of doing small business worksite, and I will go out on a limb here, I don't do a lot of worksites, but I can say large worksites, but I believe this will probably hold true for large worksites. Unless you can create a culture of wellness, it will be impossible to sustain health improvements. And I don't care what kinds of incentives or what kind of program model you have in place, unless you've created the culture that supports folks, then you will not be able to sustain health improvements. You will not be able to keep people engaged. And some of the techniques that we use as engagement strategies were recognition through talking about success stories. We have a standard that we will offer fit tickets and drawings for people who come in, do their biometric assessments. Usually the second time around, and in mature programs, we'll even offer a fit ticket for each improved health value or maintenance of a health value that we measure. We do team things. We do worksite versus worksites. We do some online interactive type contests. We have a program that we call Around the World in 80 Ways. And again, it is activity-based. And I think, again, I'm kind of, well, I am biased. I'm an exercise physiologist by training. But I do know, and I will tell you, that of all of the interventions that we do, the most positive impact, one intervention, fitness, exercise, activity, has an impact on almost all the other behaviors, on nutrition, on obesity, on smoking, on stress, and so on. And also a key reason why I felt it was very important to actually have a tool that measured fitness, again coming from an exercise physiology background. That's what I did for a living, for a career for many years. There's a good deal of research that's very supportive of the importance of physical activities. Dr. Steve Blair did a lot of work in this area, published a seminal paper that changed the whole way that we looked at exercise, physical activity, based on research findings, where he talked about even as little as 30 minutes a day of activity, and it could be broken up into 10-minute sections, could be beneficial. And if you look at all-cause mortality, the highest indicator of all-cause mortality, even if you have all the other multiple risks, the highest single indicator was poor fitness. And so again, we place an emphasis on when we do incentives, contests, at worksites, team competitions, etc. We really want to have people engaged in doing physical activity. And again, another thing that we found is that one of the really interesting components of fitness, physical activity, is that when you can measure it, people who, and that's a tough habit to get going with most people, we can come back quickly, we can measure, we can quantitative measurement. A person will go out and do a prescribed activity program that we give them, and they come back in as little as 2 to 3 months. We remeasure them, and we see their ViATL2, their mLs per kg per minute, their fitness score, actually in as little as 2 to 3 months dramatically improved, and that gives very, very positive feedback to a person and really excites them about the physical activity component. And I can say the same thing about the remeasurement that we stress with doing biometrics again, with cholesterol and blood pressure, percentage of fat, waist measurement, etc. You give people immediate and close feedback to the interventions. I think they're much more successful at people staying on track and staying with them. Again, what we found works. A lot of people get trouble, not trouble, but a lot of people run into roadblocks of getting people to fill out health risk appraisals. And again, we have a customized, and I call that health survey. And our health surveys are filled out on the spot with the client by our wellness coach. Our wellness coach also does their biometric assessment, then provides a feedback on all of the numbers that were assessed, and then provides a coaching session. We take a look and we do our evaluation of health outcomes for employers, and also satisfaction surveys, where we'll give a baseline report. We'll then provide a 6-month, a 1 year, and then every 6 months thereafter. And again, we have the ability, because we do this in real-time live data, we have the ability to actually provide a report at any time. The next thing that I'll talk about is that we do our screenings, our biometric assessments, coaching sessions. We do waves within the worksite. That was a component that they found in the original worksite studies done in the GM plant studies, the large worksites, where people had multiple opportunities to actually engage themselves. And usually what we find in the small worksites is we'll also employ waves. And also because of our follow-up protocol, we're back in there anyways in 2 to 3 months and 6 months, and usually 10 to 12 months. And so we're there and we're back in the site multiple times. And so we create a buzz with the first initial assessment phase and screening. That goes out, and we come back the second time, and there are more people that want to sign up and get engaged, and so on and so on. And generally in our small work sites, usually by the, depending upon the size, usually by the second and third year. And again, this is without a lot of, the major incentives you see a lot of the larger companies offering now. And I think the last look, I looked at a Buck Consultant survey that was just released, and the average amount being spent now on incentivizing employees is about $350 per employee. And I think that's a lot of money. And I think worksites are now taking a look at that carefully and are reconsidering. Got off the topic a little bit here. Also, within our follow-up procedures, we put people in a caseload management system whereby if we medically refer them for a at-risk value for blood pressure, cholesterol, elevated glucose, or any other medical condition, we are aggressive with medical referral. We never stop calling, emailing, seeing those people until we get some answers as to have they made a connection with their medical provider, and have they been placed under any kind of treatment protocol. We also perform, as I told you, a culture and environmental survey with the worksite, and we do this every time we do a corporate report back to our clients, again, which is baseline in the first year, 6 months. We get results done sites at 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and then usually semi-annually after that. And a lot of interest in the last several years about how do we develop cultures of wellness. I think a key and a component to this is establishing a worksite wellness committee, and not just simply giving people instructions and say go forth and sin no more and create this committee. We have found that you actually have to staff that worksite wellness committee with a professional from your team, so the vendor actually has to be there with a person on site that meets with that wellness committee to provide directions. We also provide an actual training to the worksite wellness committee where we go over and talk about goals and objectives for the program. We talk about, very important, about metrics for success in this program. What are we trying to achieve? And then initially, with the wellness committee, you're probably going to have meetings in the beginning every couple of weeks, and once this gets going, probably at least once a year, once a month, and then in mature programs, when you're probably around 3 years down the road, some of our sites go to a quarterly type wellness committee meeting. But I think this is a strategic and most important component to create the culture and to create the environment at the worksite. And many times what we'll do is we'll assign, our task will be taken up by people on that worksite wellness committee, worksite wellness team, and they will actually perform the worksite wellness environmental survey. They'll be responsible in helping promote the program. They'll be responsible for in helping recruit people to the program. And again, who best to know initially the culture of the worksite and what's going to work at the worksite than people within that worksite itself. The other thing that we do, and I think is really important and a fun thing for a lot of our worksites, is we do community tie-ins to the various national health events. There's also some local events, but some of the national health events that we tie into with our worksites are the 24-hour relays for cancer, the Pink Awareness, the American Heart Go for Red, Go Red for Women, and there's a number of them. There's also some things that we do. One of our worksites actually has created an event within their community where they invite other worksites in the community to a 5K event, a walking and race event, which they've been doing now for the past, I think they're going on their 4th year of doing this. Now this is what that whole process looks like. The biometric screening assessment, the health survey information is done by one person. There are no stations to go to. There are no lines. A person has an appointment. They come into the allotted time of their appointment. They sit down with a wellness coach, and they are privately and individually assessed. This is Linda Howard, and she's been with me now for going on 14 years. She's one of our premier wellness coaches, several of her sites, and I'll show you, several of the work sites that she has worked with have won national recognition and awards. And I'll tell you that, this is not stressed a lot of times when you go to conferences and hear about successful programs, but really one of the core things is those wellness coaches that are doing the interventions are crucial. What I have found that really makes a successful wellness coach is when they come to us, one of the key features of these people is they really want to make a difference in the lives of people. The second thing is that because of this model, they get a lot of positive feedback. Each one of these coaches, when they do their assessment and health survey, their individual appointment with the client, they get immediate feedback. The survey is sent out immediately to the client that's just had the experience, and that client evaluates the coaching session, and the coaches can see and evaluate how they're performing with their various engagement techniques with the client. And again, we measure fitness, blood pressure, cholesterol, glucose, weight, BMI, waist, percent body fat. We do a hybrid kind of, it's not actually, I don't call it health risk appraisal, but a health survey where we look at most of the major things that you'll see in a typical health survey. But again, it was tailored, and some of the questions that I usually get at this point if we were in front of an audience is, well, how much time does it take to do this one-on-one engagement assessment? We have it down to 30 minutes, approximately 30 minutes per assessment. The first 10 minutes of this assessment is usually done doing the biometrics. The last 20 minutes is doing the coaching, counseling session, and goal setting. Again, putting an emphasis on the remeasurement component for all employees. We see everybody at least twice a year. And again, one of the things that I like to talk about is my dentist. And I look at my dentist as one of the best preventionists in the medical realm out there. And if you remember, early in the 1950s, a thing called fluoridation in the water came along. And a lot of dentists panicked because they thought they weren't going to have any more work because everybody was going to have no more cavities. And so what they did is they became very, very good and interested in, well, how can we help our clients with preventive techniques? And I know that if you're involved with a good dentist, and most of us are, you'll find that you get a call every 6 months and you get a postcard every 6 months from your dentist scheduling for your preventive exam. And that's exactly what we do at our worksites. They get a call. We use engagement strategies. We keep them engaged where they do this process every 6 months, where they sit down with a wellness coach, go through a coaching session, assessment, etc. We do monthly e-messaging. We have a secure site that's on our server that we can actually do what would be considered confidential information, talking about biometric data. Our coaches do SMART goal setting with each of the clients, develop skills training, and we provide a report feedback to our clients on success rate of medical referrals. Now, these are some resources. I think this is a great resource. Michigan Steps Up. Well, if you read my bio, I was part of this. I was a co-chair of this group, and it's still in existence on the web, but no longer in existence as a formal meeting group. But I was a co-chair of this group, and we did develop a great tool called the Designing Healthy Worksite Environments. And it's a tool that you can actually download when you go to the site, click on the business section, and what you'll see there on the right-hand side is you can look up environmental surveys, I believe, and you can actually download a hard copy, but you can also do this survey online, and it's still live, it's still being used, and you can be out of state. You don't have to be a Michigan company to use it, and it's a great resource. We use it at our worksites all the time. The other resource is we incorporated in actually in 2003, we incorporated into our data management system some key questions on cultural touch points and peer support that we got from Dr. Judd Allen. And again, there's great information on how to develop healthy cultures. I'll say that Judd is a good personal friend of mine. I've known him for over 20 years. One of the first journals published, the American Journal of Health Promotion in 1987, one of their lead articles was by Dr. Richard Allen and Judd Allen. His dad has since died, but he continues with his work. But it was when I read that article on culture, it really resonated with me, and I got very excited by it. And of all the, and I'll tell you, I am following my bliss with what we're doing on Worksites. And I love what I do, and we do what we love. And again, I'm going to reemphasize this again. You have to create a culture of wellness. You have to create that supportive environment that then you can sustain and help people along the wellness continuum of developing healthy practices, habits, reducing risks, long-term outcomes. Dr. Diettington's research findings, what he talked about was some of the key components of 20 years of research, 2.5 million people. And again, a lot of us look at this as common sense, but we had to prove it. What he has shown is as health risks increase in work populations, healthcare costs increase. If you reduce health risks, work costs decrease as you reduce risk. High risk persons are high cost. This was a really interesting, the low risk maintenance programs are important, keeping the healthy people healthy. Again, he'll tell you that's where you get your biggest bang for the buck. Once they have a chronic disease or they're at risk, it's much more difficult. And another really fascinating one is emphasizing the risk that it's not static, that in the course of a worksite, employees will drift from a low-risk status to a high-risk status, 2 to 4% migration from low risk to higher risk within 1 year. And productivity findings are following the same kind of directions as medical care costs. What works best, again, agree on metrics for success. And again, this is real important. When you get into a small worksite, you really want to develop a well-thought-out plan that looks at about 3 years. The next thing is you want to talk about, agree upon, what are we going to measure in the program and what are good metrics for success. And I'm going to show you some of those that we use in Worksites shortly. We put a focus on health risk reduction, not on return on investments, not on we're going to save you $1 gazillion, etc. If you remember the slide about the key findings, common sense. If I can talk to CEO, CFO, president, owner of a company, sit down, go over the research, show him what we have done, that we've actually gone into companies and we've benchmarked those companies, we identified what those health risks are, and we've reduced and eliminated those risks. Mr. CEO, CFO, would you believe that we're going to save you money or we're going to save you in terms of lost employee productivity? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. And so in all the years, this program model that was implemented, it was really tied into not providing ROI, not providing claims analysis or any of that. The number one thing that I emphasize, we emphasize within this model, and I hope others would take a careful look at this, because I think it's very difficult to produce and to talk about these ROIs and these zillions of dollars that we're going to save companies, but we know we can reduce and we can eliminate risks, and we know we can sustain those risk reductions over time by creating cultures that support wellness. Whoops. This model has won and been recognized by numerous national organizations and awards, and this is just a sample of them. The very first worksite, small business worksite that did this model was recognized, and that was a research study that I showed that was done in 1991, the small business research study. That was an aviation company called Cal Aero in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they were the first small business worksite to be recognized by the Save Recoup National Health Award. And again, the model has been recognized by SAMHSA, by The model is in the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs. Just recently won a Walcoa Gold Award, Kalamazoo County. And then Michigan has won numerous statewide Governor's Council's awards. Now I'm going to show you some, this is actual data, and I talked about you have to come back to your Worksite and actually show them with risk reductions, health improvements, that what you're doing works. And this is Kalamazoo Valley Community College. The CDZ, Center for Disease Control, came down. Their SWAT team, they call it, Swift Worksite Assessment and Translation. And there's a resource at the end of this that you can take a look at the different programs that were recognized. But they came down and they studied, and they actually spent 5 days with KVCC, and they were really fascinated in what they found and what they saw. And this is why. They had risk reduction on health outcomes. These are based on not self-reported data, but an actual measurement of biometrics. And the measurement of biometrics were, and again, we measured poor fitness. Poor fitness was measured. Took a look at blood pressure, cholesterol above 200 or higher, waist at risk, smoking, and elevated glucose. And you can see at the start of the program, November 1st, 18% were at 0 risks. And then you can see as the program progressed what happened. And so that's what they wanted to find out, what was going on here on this site. 66%. And again, when we talk about one of the best wellness programs in the country, I think this is them. And I hear people every now and then occasionally say, I don't see anybody's data that matches this kind of data yet. And so again, the model is very effective. There are criticisms of the biometric screening component. I've heard those bandied about back and forth for the last several years. But again, you can't argue with something that actually works. And this is it. You'll see that that's changed. And then also if you look in the right-hand column, over the years it's changed a bit. But KVCC actually grew, and as they were growing from 2001, they were actually adding employees. They actually added maybe around 100 plus employees over the course of several years. Next, metrics. We actually, with the Wellness Committee, discussed on what our targets were, what success. We targeted 75% participation. They hit 94. We took a look at the no and low risk group, and this is being talked about as a major metric now for most work sites, large work sites, and medium and small. Achieved that goal. They're at 77%. The goal was 50% no CBD measured risk. They're at 66%. And then again, with a high degree of cultural support and change in environment. The next one I'm going to show is FlexFab Corporation, small business in Hastings, Michigan. This is at the low risk, the medium, and the high risk. What we took a look at were measured risk factors of biometrics related to heart disease, and then we took a look at health surveys, and we looked at high stress, depression, high alcohol, fat consumption, low fruit and vegetable consumption, and fiber. And what we saw is a movement from the low and no risk to 60%. And the high risk group, remember that the de-Eddington will talk about the trend and the flow. We reversed the flow of risk from high risk and actually reversed that risk, not only arrested it, but reversed it. And so we have people moving on this continuum from high risk to medium to low, and where the majority of people now are at low risk. These are super when I look at them, and really interesting. When I walked in and started talking about this cultural part to the CFO at Hastings Fiberglass, one of the first questions he asked in the second year was, before you show me any of the other stuff, how are we doing in the cultural part? And again, this is based on the Likert scale, where we look at strong agreement and agreement. And you see in 205, company leaders support the model, 33%, now 62. Demonstration of the commitment by the company from 65 to 88%. This company was doing some things originally, kind of hit and miss, worksite wellness. This is probably one of the most crucial elements of this whole series here. People at this company are taught skills needed to achieve healthy lifestyles. You can see from 42% to 83. New employees are made aware of the program. People are recognized from 34 to 75%. People are rewarded and recognized for their efforts from 35 to 82%. And the peer support, again, just massive improvements and changes in the peer support. Hastings Fiberglass, another company just down the road, and again looking at cardiovascular disease risk factors over the course from September 9 to 11 now, when the data was reported out. We're looking at 36% at the beginning to 45% no measured CVD risks. And again, you see the migration of risk from, instead of going from lower risk to higher risk, it's going from higher risk to lower risk. Looking at the 12 lifestyle indicators where we combine the biometrics and the lifestyle, they're at 82% now. They started at 49%. And again, beautiful scores in the cultural component. People at this company are taught skills and they need to look at where they went. They started at 25%, and people are actually, this is where they are engaged. They are taking what they are learning from the environment and learning from the coaching, learning from the education sessions, and applying it and actually showing improvements. And the beauty of this model is we did a white paper on this, and it's at the end in a resource list. And what we found is that as worksites became more and more engaged culturally and environmentally supportive, when those scores improved, side by side the risk scores improved and the health behaviors improved. And again, we were able to sustain these health improvements and risk reductions over time. And again, this points to the concept of having that a strong, healthy culture and an environment. Almost time. And these are the metrics of success or goals that we set: 75% participation that are 100%. They surpassed their goal on the 12 lifestyle. We're almost there. And again, we're into our 6th year now of from 45% of the measured CVD risk to we're at 45%, target is 50. Summary of what works. You have to employ a comprehensive model using the evidence that's out there, evidence and science-based. I feel the core of this is face-to-face assessment. You can use other engagement techniques, and it's all part of the menu. I think we're going to be learning more and more new things. New stuff coming out about people using mobile devices and applications, but I still think the core and what we found, the engagement, is the face-to-face, one-on-one. Again, I repeat, if you do not create the culture, you are not going to sustain your health improvements. You're not going to create an environment where that is sustainable for those people. It's so difficult when people leave that worksite and they go out into the community and they're bombarded by the marketing sector of the McDonald's and the et cetera, et cetera. You need to look for a long-term commitment with companies. I usually try and say that a minimum of 3 years. You need to devise a budget with these companies. Investment that we found that you can actually implement these programs is about $350 per employee. You need to be impeccable in your execution. And then even in smaller work sites, you're going to find it takes time. This is a listing of resources that are available. The CDC committee panel that I served on actually produced a paper, which is a very good paper. Ron Gotzo published that. Online, actually at Health Promotion Live, you can visit Ron Gatzel, and he talked about the Workforce Wellness Index. Again, a good listing of a good mention of best practices, and assorted resources. Thank you. Thank you for your attention today, and I hope that I spurred some interest, some excitement about the small business wellness sector, which is still a very, very underserved population.
Well, that's absolutely true, and thank you, Ken. That was a ton of information, and I think, not positive because it's unscientific, but I think you may have elicited the most questions of anybody to date. If not, you're way up there in the top 10%. Let me ask you just a couple of things really quick.
Okay.
One, give me a number on how you define small business.
Well, I did. Well, it's actually defined, but usually a company under 500.
Under 500.
Medium size, 500 to 999. Large worksites, 1,000 plus.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a small SBA, Small Business Association, way they define it.
Okay.
Again, what I'll say is that most of the people, when they do surveys, they find that most of the small businesses are under 20 people.
Hmm.
Under 20 people. And in that original seminal survey on small business worksites, one of those small worksites was a company of 5 people, was an actual gas station, where we pulled up to the gas station with a wellness coach, and they did the assessment in the back room of the gas station.
Awesome.
Did the follow-up too, coming back.
Let's see. Carol is wondering, I'm going to just get a couple of questions, and I'm going to send them all to you, and you can follow up with people individually. Let's see. Was the $350 a per year cost per employee?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. And the question about the your coaches, are they certified specifically by one group or another, or?
Well, they're certified by Holtyn Associates, but some of them have, and actually we've credentialed most of our people at National Wellness Institute. But I will share with you that several of our people are master's level. One of our people is actually a licensed psychologist that's certified in counseling. 2 of them are licensed social workers. Again, so they have a pretty strong background in counseling.
Super. And that other question was, and I think you just answered it, but just to be sure, somebody was wondering, are they nurses? Or do you have nurses on staff?
Yes, we have 2 nurses on staff right now.
Super. Okay, well, I'm gonna end this because we ran over, and darn it, I'm sorry, but there was no way to stop you. You had way too much great information to share, and the fact that everybody is still here and so many great comments, I think, speaks to the fact that this is a really important topic, and I really appreciate you covering it. You know, before I say goodbye, I want to say if you guys are at all in Kentucky next week, please come and say hello at the Kentucky Wellness Conference. I'll be there along with, you know, a bunch of other people, and we're actually going to do a meetup on the 8th. So if you can join us, and Ken, I suspect you won't leave Florida for that, but you know, it's not that you're not invited.
Yeah. Well, and same here. Remember, Kalamazoo, Michigan, May 3rd, and we'll talk about some of the strategies, or we call it secrets of success. Dee will talk about the next 25 years of wellness, of what he sees, and then we'll have a panel of these various corporations that, several of them have won some national awards for their work sites. But again, they use the model that we just spoke about, that I just spoke about.
Great.
So again, I invite everybody down for that if they're in the area.
Well, I'll if you send me a link to that conference, and I'll put it up with the with this recording, because, as you know, this has been recorded and will be available later this afternoon. So, Ken, have a great weekend. Thank you so much for providing such great information. And everyone, thanks for being here. Hope to see you again soon. Have a great weekend.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, you too.